Hi, I'm Ari, I'm the Oak Witch, and in today's video I'm going to be going over some simple, low energy and budget friendly offerings. So offerings can be quite an integral part to many witchcraft practices, from offerings to local land spirits, to familiars, to ancestors, to deities. It is a key way in which we can build a relationship with these spirits. And sometimes I feel like there's a little bit of a over-dramatic portrayal of what offerings need to look like. Online and in books you see this concept of offerings that have to be really exotic fruits or really expensive alcohol or fresh flowers every week or homemade baked bread or cakes. And don't get me wrong, this is amazing, it's wonderful, it's a lovely way to show effort and hard work to these spirits, and obviously that is actually quite a important way in which we can show our appreciation and build that relationship. Obviously you have to put in the effort and put in that hard work sometimes because it really shows, but it's not the only way we can do offerings, and to a lot of people doing all that kind of stuff isn't really that accessible. For any fellow witches with depression, or for any witches who have quite a low budget in terms of stuff they can afford for their craft, for those who simply just don't have the energy for these really highly extravagant regular offerings, it can be really inaccessible and unattainable. So today I'm going to outline 5 really simple offerings that are quite accessible, that are fairly low energy to perform and to put out for, whatever spirit that you are worshipping or trying to build a relationship with. And these offerings are very, very basic, and they are kind of widely applicable, but of course certain spirits may require certain offerings or they have certain preferences, so that is also something to bear in mind. But these are just some basic offerings which I feel like are quite applicable to most spirits. Because I think something I want to highlight is that offerings don't have to be really, really expensive and extravagant for them to mean something. I think with giving offerings to spirits, the main thing is how you give them. If you're presenting the offering with pretty much neutrality, with no feeling or emotion or, any sincerity, then I think that can really hinder that. If you're giving these offerings with sincerity, if you're coming at it from a really genuine approach, then I think that really shows. So yeah, simple offerings can really go a long way as well. So that's what I want to go over today, with the first one being water. A cup of fresh water is probably the most accessible offering you can give, and it really goes a long way. Fresh drinking water that you would drink is something that is really simple to do and still a great offering to give. If you have a little bit more energy, ways to spice this up is I like to put ice cubes in the water. I like to make sure that the cup I'm actually putting the water in is quite nice. So something nice to do as well is presenting the cup of water down on your altar, shrine, whatever, and also taking a sip of your own drink as you are placing the offering down, so you're kind of drinking together with the spirit, and that's sort of a way to bond as well. So another offering idea I have for you are candles. Now candles can be fairly cheap when bought in bulk, and they're really great offering ideas to spirits. Where water can be quite nourishing, fire, a flame, can be quite transformative. It can bring warmth and can act as a guiding light for these spirits. Especially if you have a shrine dedicated to a specific spirit, your deities or your ancestors or, land spirits, the flame, the light can act as a sort of guide in the night, a place for shelter, sort of act as that signifying symbolism. And honestly, this doesn't have to be a massive pillar candle adorned with lovely herbs, and it can be, but it can just be something as simple as a tea light in a fireproof candle holder. That is a lovely offering to give, and it can just be as simple as that. If you have more means, then ways you can spice this up is, yes, you can add a little bit of herbs at the top of the candle and the sides, but please note, only do a little bit unless you are prepared and have a proper fireproof safe area for a candle that's adorned with lovely herbs, because that does create a massive fire because the herbs can catch on fire, and it can be quite dangerous unless you're really prepared for it. So do make sure that you're being safe with the herbs and oils that you adorn your candles with. But of course, this is a way in which you can dress up your candle and sort of add in that little bit extra if you wanted to. You can also just carve the name of the spirit in the candle and anoint it with oil. Don't have to put on the herbs, and that can just be something really nice to dedicate to your spirit. And yeah, so the next one I'll talk about is the concept of prayer. A prayer is so beautiful and it's so underappreciated in our community, I find. I think people perhaps associate it with strictly organized religion, but prayer is art, it's poetry, and it's something which at a base level just means you're talking and communicating with your spirits. It's just really as simple as that. A prayer can just be, in whatever way you pray. I like to have sort of my eyes closed, or however I feel, sitting in front of my shrine or altar and have my hands out as opposed to together. Sometimes I do together still, but mostly I like to have my hands open to sort of signify that I'm presenting a message and would like to receive communication back, if that makes sense. I'm sort of doing it with open arms. That's what I like to do when I'm praying. A prayer in that sense can literally just be speaking from your heart, just calling out to the spirit, the deity, your ancestors, just speaking from your soul, your heart, just whatever you need to get out there. And it can just be as simple as that, and that can just be a small part of your morning or evening, and that's all it has to be. Or prayers can be a really lovely constructed poem that you are presenting to the spirit, and that could be a nice thing you're sort of dedicating to your spirit and present to the spirit as an offering. If you can't say it out loud, then you can just write down the prayer or the poem and just place it on your altar or shrine, and it can just be that. You don't have to speak out loud if you can't. But yeah, prayer can come in so many different forms, but I think the key thing behind it is the sincerity in which you do it. I think that can really show and go a long way. And this one is really accessible because all you really need is yourself and a sacred space or time in which you're dedicating to the spirit, just to speak from your heart and just actively communicate with the spirit. And another one which is kind of similar to this is energetic offerings. So another really massively accessible one, in the sense that you don't really need anything, you just need yourself. And perhaps this requires a bit more energy. You need a bit more sort of effort to sort of do this, but it just requires, you know, perhaps you're sitting in front of your shrine or your altar. You center yourself, make sure you're sort of within yourself, and you raise that energy and you direct it to the spirit. I think this can also include things like really focusing on a feeling. For example, if I'm calling out to a specific deity and I really want to show them my appreciation, I'll build up this feeling of love, of adoration, of appreciation, really build on up and focus on that feeling and project it to the spirit, to perhaps a like image of them I have in my head, or maybe if you have a statue of your deity, you can sort of push it into the statue. So there's different ways in which you can kind of channel it to the deity, or like just try and let them receive that message. This can come in many different forms, I find, but it's just that concept of really building up that energy and just sending it out to them. That process of really taking the time to devote your time to the spirit, to show them that you're putting effort into that relationship, and it can really help build that relationship. And the last simple offering idea I have for you is incense. Whilst making your own incense blends and putting in certain herbs which you know certain spirits really enjoy is really lovely, and of course that really goes a long way. But if you're just low on energy, low on funds, a really accessible offering is just incense sticks or incense cones. These can be bought in many different spiritual shops. And whilst I'm a full supporter of shopping sustainably and shopping locally, buying incense which is made local and sold local isn't always accessible for everyone, and sometimes that's just the way these things are. So if you can obviously shop sustainably, I would recommend going for that option. A lot of sustainable shopping isn't really accessible for a lot of people. So obviously I would like to give that tip and encourage people to be more eco-friendly, but I do recognise that this isn't always accessible for everybody, and that is okay. There are ways in which you can make your own incense, and my friend Megan did a video on this, which I'll link above. That is a really lovely thing to do. It shows that effort, and putting in that effort is massively rewarding in that relationship that you're building with a certain spirit. But of course this requires a bit more funds, a bit more energy. So if you're, if you want to try that out, that's a really great idea. But simply lighting an incense stick or an incense cone on your altar, just dedicating that as an offering to a spirit, is really simple. It can take like a couple seconds to do, and it can also go a long way. If you are able to get incense which corresponds with, the thing that your deity prefers, like a type of incense, then that's great, obviously. But for example, I have a whole bunch of incense which I bought years ago that I went through like this phase in my childhood where I just buy so many incense sticks, and I am still going through it, to be honest. So there's so much incense which I'm just using now as offerings, and they're not necessarily specific, but I still think they can go a long way. But of course certain spirits may prefer certain scents, so that's something to consider. So yeah, those are my 5 sort of ideas for really simple offerings. I think the overall thing to consider is that offerings don't have to be this massive ritual process. They don't have to be this process where you're calling down the quarters, you're casting a circle, and you're like lighting a bunch of candles and presenting this offering, and this really ritualistic process. It doesn't have to be like that. It can if you want to, and obviously if you're doing offerings for a specific magical working, that will be a bit more of a different process. But basic offerings you're giving in a sort of regular structure just for adoration, to building that relationship, they don't need to be this huge long process. It can be just a part of your morning routine where you wake up, you light your deity's candle, you give a fresh cup of water, and you light an incense stick, and you maybe say a few words. Hail goddess of said thing, protect me today on whilst I do blah blah blah, and then it can just be as simple as that. I think sometimes going back to simplicity and doing that in a sincere way can really show, rather than doing loads and loads of show and a lot of the faff without any actual underlying meaning. Doesn't actually go a long way as you might think. I think being sincere in the basics can really go a long way, and once you have that and you're comfortable with that, I think it's easier to add bits on here and there, add the bit of the dramatic flair when it feels right and when it feels accessible for you to do so. So yeah, I guess the tip I would like to give is, if you do feel like, a bit bogged down because you don't really have all the funds to do these massive lovely offerings, or you don't really have the energy to do them, that's okay, and you're not alone. Something that might help is to sort of stand back a little bit from this expectation and just really go down to the basics, because these basics are not basic. People sort of paint this portrayal of being basic as just being, this beginner, it's nothing, it's amateur, but basics are really important. They're foundations on which your practice is built, and foundations are really important. That's just my advice, just to say that sometimes just simple offerings are so good, and if they're all you can do right now, then don't worry about it, you're just as valid. Thank you so much for watching. This was a short video I wanted to do because lately I have been doing so long videos. I wanted to do something a bit shorter, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope it was useful for you. And yeah, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.